In a world where refrigeration is the norm, the Amish community thrives without the hum of modern appliances. They've mastered the art of food preservation using time-tested techniques passed down through generations. From bustling kitchens filled with laughter to quiet pantries lined with carefully stored treasures, the Amish show us that creativity and tradition can go hand in hand. Storing food without a refrigerator might seem like something only survivalists or reality TV contestants do, but for the Amish, it's just everyday life. And one of their best-kept secrets? Good old-fashioned water bath canning. If you've ever seen shelves packed with jars of pickles, peaches, or tomatoes, you've witnessed the magic of this method in action. At first glance, it looks simple. Just stick food in a jar, boil it, and call it a day. But let me tell you, this is no beginner's kitchen project. When I tried canning peaches at home, I ended up with a sticky mess, jars that refused to seal, and the sudden realization that I might not survive the apocalypse. The Amish, on the other hand, have this down to a science. They carefully wash and prepare every jar, filling each one with fruits, veggies, or sauces, then lower them into bubbling pots of boiling water like they're sending them off on a deep-sea mission. The heat kills off any bacteria or mold spores that could ruin the food, and once the jars are sealed, they can sit on a shelf for years without a worry. It's like time travel for food. What you eat in 2034 could be the tomatoes you picked this summer. The record for some canned goods? Over 5 years of freshness, as long as that seal holds tight. Honestly, I think the toughest part isn't the boiling or even the timing. It's resisting the urge to pop the jars open early and dig in. My grandma about canning, and she gave me this look like, "What do you mean you don't know how?" Apparently, not knowing the difference between a hot pack and a raw pack makes you some kind of amateur in her eyes. But the Amish treat this skill like an art form, and those jars become their secret stash for when crops run low or the weather turns nasty. Winter storms don't mean panic trips to the grocery store for them. They just grab a jar of home-canned potatoes and get cooking. Now, here's the real kicker: the taste. Unlike frozen vegetables, which can turn into sad, mushy versions of themselves after a few months, canned goods stay flavorful. There's something nostalgic about the way Amish pickles snap between your teeth, or how a canned peach tastes like a little bite of sunshine in the dead of winter. And it's all made possible without a single fridge in sight. When you think about it, that's probably why this method has lasted so long. There's no electricity bill, no risk of power outages spoiling your food, and no fussing with digital temperature settings. Just jars, boiling water, and a little know-how passed down from one generation to the next. But of course, nothing is ever foolproof. If you've ever tried to pry open a stubborn jar lid, you know what I mean. Last year, I canned some salsa, sealed it so tightly that I needed 2 pairs of hands and a jar opener to crack it open. My neighbor said I should market it as tamper-proof salsa and charge extra. That's the thing with water bath canning. It's as much an exercise in patience as it is a preservation method. You have to get the timing just right, or the jars won't seal properly. And if you think screwing on the lid tighter will help, well, good luck with that. At least the Amish don't have to deal with picky dinner guests whining about Best By dates. If it's in the pantry, it's good to go. What do you do with wood ash once the fire dies out? If you're Amish, you don't just toss it. You use it to keep food fresh. The idea of storing eggs in ashes might sound like the result of an accidental spill, but it's anything but random. Long before refrigeration was an option, people discovered that a good pile of clean, dry ash could preserve food and keep pests far away. It's not just clever, it's downright scientific. Ash is alkaline, which creates a hostile environment for bacteria. No bacteria, no rot. Simple, right? You've got to admit it's a bit ironic. Most of us see ash and think dirty mess. The Amish see it and think perfect egg storage. Eggs are packed inside containers filled with ash, each one neatly tucked away like a treasure waiting to be cracked open months later. And not just eggs, root vegetables like carrots and beets can enjoy the same VIP treatment. It's like giving them a cozy winter coat so they can survive the long months ahead without sprouting or turning mushy. The trick here is patience. And trust me, the Amish have that in spades. If you bury the food too soon or mess up with damp ash, you've got a disaster waiting to happen. My first attempt at storing eggs in ash felt more like an awkward science experiment than food preservation. I went overboard with the ash. Must have buried those eggs like I was protecting them from a meteor shower. A month later, I couldn't even find them without getting half the ash pile in my kitchen. Lesson learned: moderation matters. It's also worth noting that not just any ash will do. It has to come from clean, untreated wood. No fireplace remnants from your scented pine logs, unfortunately. The Amish know this, of course, because they've mastered the fine art of simplicity. It's the same kind of genius you see when someone makes a perfect pie crust without measuring anything. Ash has been a low-key hero for centuries. The ancient Romans used it in food preservation, and it's still going strong today in the kitchens of people who appreciate the slow, deliberate ways of doing things. Makes you wonder, why aren't more of us trying this? We've got fire pits in our backyards, but instead of storing eggs, we're using them to roast marshmallows and burn old receipts. Not that there's anything wrong with s'mores, but the Amish have found a way to turn the leftover ashes into pure preservation gold. Speaking of turning back the clock, wouldn't it be nice if we could stash other things in ash to keep them from going bad? Like, say, our joints? I'd happily bury my knees in a bucket of ash if it meant they'd stop creaking every time I stand up. But alas, the magic only works for vegetables and eggs. Nature's way of reminding us that while we can save food, the best we can do for ourselves is a little yoga. Once you get the hang of this whole ash trick, it starts to make sense why they've stuck with it for generations. It's low cost, reliable, and has the added benefit of confusing the heck out of anyone who walks into your house and sees a bin full of eggs buried in ashes. When you explain it, they might look at you like you've lost your mind, but hey, they'll be asking for your preserved eggs when their store-bought ones spoil. And isn't that just the way it always goes? Picture a world where butter isn't just for toast. It's a food-saving superhero. While we're all busy figuring out how to store leftovers without leaks, the Amish have cracked the code using nothing more than fat. When cooked meat is submerged in melted lard or tallow, it creates a smooth, airtight seal that blocks out oxygen, giving bacteria no chance to crash the party. In other words, it's nature's version of Tupperware, minus the lids that always seem to disappear when you need them. And it's not just any meat. Bacon, sausage, and even duck have all been known to swim in fat baths for months at a time, staying as fresh as the day they were cooked. I'll admit, the first time I tried sealing a roast in lard, I felt like a contestant on a survival reality show. 2 months later, when I cracked that jar open, the meat was so tender you'd think it spent the last 8 weeks at a spa. My family wasn't quite as impressed, though. "Are we really eating this?" they asked with a mix of skepticism and mild fear. I assured them it was perfectly safe, though I can't say they were convinced. Here's the thing about fat sealing. It works because no air means no spoilage. Without oxygen, bacteria have nothing to feed on, so the food stays edible for months, or even longer if kept cool. This technique isn't just about survival, it's also about flavor. The fat locks in moisture, ensuring the food tastes just as good, if not better, after a little time has passed. Think of it like marinating, but with an added bonus: no expiration date in sight. And here's a fun fact. The French actually call this process confit, and it's been keeping duck legs delicious for centuries. If it's good enough for French chefs, it's good enough for anyone. The best part? It doesn't require any fancy equipment, just a jar, some fat, and a little patience. But I'll warn you, make sure your fat is well filtered, or you might end up with some crispy bits swimming in there. Unless, of course, you like surprises in your food. Speaking from experience, nothing beats the thrill of biting into what you thought was a tender piece of meat, only to discover a rogue crumb of bacon hidden within. Fermentation isn't just some hipster trend from a farmer's market. Amish folks have been doing it forever, long before kombucha became the drink of choice for people in yoga pants. The beauty of fermented foods lies in their simplicity. Let nature do the work, and it rewards you with vegetables that can survive the apocalypse, and maybe even your picky relatives. Sauerkraut, pickles, and beets are transformed through a process where bacteria feast on sugars, turning food into tangy, long-lasting staples. Now, if you think fermentation is as easy as tossing cabbage in a jar and hoping for the best, think again. It's a delicate dance. Too much time and your sauerkraut might take on a smell that could clear out a family reunion. Too little and you've got soggy cabbage sitting in brine, not much better than a sad salad. The trick is in the balance, letting the good bacteria take control before the bad ones get ideas. When I tried making sauerkraut at home, I proudly told everyone I was channeling my inner pioneer. What I didn't expect was the smell. Imagine opening a jar and suddenly your kitchen smells like an old gym locker, except that locker might actually be fermenting something edible. I stuck with it, though. A few weeks later, I cracked it open again and discovered that beneath the funky aroma lay some of the crunchiest, most flavorful kraut I'd ever tasted. My cat, however, refused to enter the kitchen for days. The science behind fermentation makes it even cooler. No electricity, no fancy gadgets, just a natural process as old as civilization itself. Some archaeological digs suggest humans were fermenting food as far back as 9,000 years ago. That means some ancient ancestor was probably munching on fermented goodies while building the pyramids. And if it worked for them, it'll work for the Amish too. Fermented foods are also the gift that keeps on giving. Shelf life stretches into years, and the flavor just keeps getting better. It's like a food version of aging gracefully. You think the first batch is good? Wait 6 months, and it's even better. But here's a word of advice. Label your jars. Once I forgot which jar was sauerkraut and which one was pickled beets. Let's just say expecting one and tasting the other is quite the surprise. Fermentation is not just about keeping food around longer. It's about culture. Pun intended, of course. You're not just storing food, you're storing a little bit of the past, capturing flavors in time. The Amish have been doing this for generations, handing down these skills the same way they hand down recipes and quilts. No Wi-Fi, no fridges, just a jar, some salt, and a whole lot of patience. It also packs a nutritional punch. It's like a kitchen miracle. With no preservatives and no chemicals, you still get probiotics that can outmatch the stuff sold in tiny, expensive bottles at health food stores. And for those who grew up hearing "eat your vegetables," the Amish have figured out the ultimate loophole. Let the vegetables ferment, and you'll want to eat them. You know those bags of jerky people grab at gas stations? The Amish probably look at those and think, amateurs. For them, drying food is more than just snacks for road trips. It's survival, plain and simple. Long before fancy electric dehydrators were a thing, they were using sun and wood ovens to remove moisture from fruits, vegetables, and meats. Less moisture means less chance for mold or bacteria, which keeps the food edible for years, sometimes decades if stored right. Ever tried sun-dried apples that are over 10 years old? They're still surprisingly good, though, much like Grandpa's jokes, a bit on the dry side. One Amish family I visited had shelves stacked with jars of dried apples, pears, and even strips of venison, all looking like they could outlive us all. When you've got 7 kids to feed, the dad explained, you learn to make food last, or the food and the kids will disappear real fast. And I can confirm those kids were fast around food. What's wild is that some dried foods, when stored in the right conditions, can last up to 20 years. Imagine stumbling across a forgotten jar of dried tomatoes at the back of a cupboard. Older than your teenager, and they're still good to eat. It's not just about survival, either. Drying food saves space and weight, which is why dried apples, apricots, and beef strips became staples for farmers, travelers, and later on, astronauts. No kidding. NASA took cues from age-old drying methods when planning space meals. Back home, I tried drying some apple slices on a wooden tray in the sun once, thinking I'd channel my inner pioneer spirit. After a few hours, I came back to find the tray empty, and my neighbor's dog sitting there, licking his chops. So, lesson learned. The Amish not only know how to dry food, they also know how to protect it. The trick is finding just the right balance. Too much moisture left inside, and mold will move in faster than relatives when you win the lottery. Too dry, and your food becomes, well, a weapon. Ever tried biting into a piece of rock-hard jerky? If the apocalypse hits, the jerky could double as a building material. The Amish have also perfected the art of drying meats in wood-fired ovens. It's not just functional, it smells amazing. Walking into a room with drying meat feels like stepping into a gourmet restaurant where the menu is survival. And here's a fun fact. Dried meat wasn't just for emergencies. It was also considered a snack back in the day, something to chew on while tending to fields or building barns. No energy drinks needed when you've got dried venison keeping you going. If your idea of treasure involves gold coins, you might be missing out. For the Amish, a proper root cellar filled with potatoes, apples, and carrots is a fortune worth more than any buried chest. Root cellars are like nature's refrigerators, without the annoying hum or the risk of a power outage. Tucked underground, these spaces keep everything cool, dark, and just the right amount of damp to make sure their bounty lasts through the harshest winters. Ever wonder why root vegetables never seem to stress out about shelf life? It's because they thrive in these cellars, where the temperature barely flinches no matter what the weather does outside. Root cellars keep the moisture level steady, and the cool air prevents spoilage like a strict hall monitor patrolling the shelves. My first time visiting one, I thought I'd stumbled into a farmer's version of Narnia. Walls lined with bins of potatoes and rows of shiny apples like little jewels waiting to be plucked. This ancient storage method has been around for over 2,000 years. The Romans, for example, used underground pits to stash away food, though I imagine Caesar would have traded his laurels for a few of those crunchy carrots the Amish squirrel away. And here's the kicker. Those apples stored in root cellars taste better after a few months. They soften just enough, with flavors that mellow out like a fine wine, without the headache the next morning. On a personal note, walking into a root cellar feels a bit like entering an old library, minus the books, but with way more turnips. There's something oddly satisfying about knowing that all this food will last without ever needing a single watt of electricity. It's also a good workout. Trust me, lugging buckets of apples up and down those cellar steps makes you think twice before you complain about grocery bags. I once volunteered to help load a friend's cellar for winter, thinking it would take a couple of hours. By the time we finished, I had carried so many pumpkins I could practically feel my biceps protesting for union rights. What's even better is how the Amish turn root cellars into social hubs. People stop by to exchange tips, trade produce, and sometimes even share a laugh about how the old turnips in the corner still look better than most of us on Monday mornings. One elder told me, "The secret to happiness is to keep your root vegetables well stocked and your neighbors guessing how you do it. Salt isn't just for seasoning your fries, it's a food warrior that has fought spoilage for centuries. Back in the day, entire economies were built around salt. They even paid Roman soldiers with the stuff. No wonder the Amish keep this ancient trick alive. When you pack something in enough salt, you're not just sprinkling flavor, you're declaring war on bacteria. The Amish salt down everything from meat to fish, layering food inside barrels packed with coarse salt until it resembles a snowdrift. Moisture is the enemy, and salt doesn't just kick it out, it slams the door behind it. Without moisture, bacteria can't thrive, so you get food that not only stays good, but can also travel through time practically. Some salted fish has been known to last for decades. That's right, this method predates fridges and probably has more staying power than my New Year's resolutions. I tried my hand at salting a ham once, thinking, how hard could it be? Spoiler, it was harder than a calculus exam. First, the salt got everywhere, between my fingers, under my nails, and somehow into my shoes. Then, I underestimated just how heavy a fully salted ham would be. Ever wrestled with a slippery, brined piece of pork? It's like trying to carry a toddler mid-tantrum. But hey, the ham lasted, and it tasted great. Only downside, I may still be finding salt crystals around the kitchen to this day. Salt-cured food is not for the faint-hearted. It takes patience and a lot of salt. But if done right, it rewards you with meat that tastes like it just came off the smoker even years later. Pickles aren't just sandwich buddies. They're the superheroes of food storage. The Amish have cracked the code on using vinegar to keep things edible long past their due date. It's kind of brilliant, really. What starts as a humble cucumber ends up outliving the bread it was supposed to sit on. That's the magic of vinegar. Foods dunked in this sour solution become untouchable to bacteria, like those secret agents who always have a way out. The Amish pickle everything. Cucumbers, of course, but also eggs, beets, and even onions. Who knew that vinegar could pull double duty? Salad dressing by day, preservation, wizard by night. Pickling isn't exactly new. Some historians say the ancient Mesopotamians were at it long before Caesar thought of conquering anything. But the Amish, they've perfected it. Here's a wild stat. An unopened vinegar pickle jar can stay good for over 5 years. That's the kind of shelf life that makes modern expiration dates look like a joke. When I tried making my first batch of pickles at home, I learned a hard lesson. One wrong move with the salt-to-vinegar ratio, and you either end up with food that could strip paint or pickle softer than old chewing gum. My family bravely tasted the first batch, but let's just say they've politely avoided my pickling experiments since. There's something oddly poetic about a jar of pickled eggs, those creamy whites floating serenely, waiting for their big day. They're the food version of an old friend, reliable, unchanged, and always ready to surprise you at a potluck. But here's a quirky thought. If I were a cucumber, I'd sign up to be pickled too. I mean, who doesn't want immortality in a jar? It's funny how simple solutions like these make high-tech gadgets look kind of unnecessary. And just when you think you've seen it all, the Amish come in with another timeless trick. When you think of smoked foods, you might picture backyard barbecues or holiday feasts, but for the Amish, it's a clever way to keep their meats deliciously fresh for longer. Smoking food isn't just a culinary delight, it's a preservation method that has stood the test of time. As the smoke dances around the food, it forms a protective layer that helps fend off bacteria, making it a practical choice for the Amish pantry. The process begins with carefully selected cuts of meat or fish. They're hung in a smokehouse where they absorb all those smoky flavors while drying out. The smoke contains chemicals that inhibit bacterial growth, which is what makes smoked foods last much longer. In fact, when done right, smoked meats can stay good for up to 2 years. That's like having a gourmet delicacy on standby for your next family gathering or a surprise guest. You might be wondering, what else do the Amish smoke besides the obvious hams and sausages? Well, they also smoke fish and cheeses. Imagine pulling out a chunk of smoked cheddar from your pantry, delicious and ready to impress. Here's an interesting tidbit. The art of smoking food isn't a recent trend. It dates back thousands of years. Early civilizations discovered that smoking meats not only enhanced flavor, but also extended their shelf life. Talk about a win-win. I remember my first attempt at smoking chicken wings. I had all the excitement in the world. Smoke billowing, meat sizzling, the whole shebang. But when I finally bit into that wing, I realized I had been too ambitious with the spices. My taste buds were fighting a spicy war, and I was just trying to enjoy dinner. It's a reminder that while smoking can be an art, it's important to keep your flavor profile in check. With the smoky goodness that permeates every bite, it's no wonder this method has become a staple in Amish food preservation. It's a culinary craft passed down through generations, keeping their tables filled with flavor and history. Herbs do more than just sprinkle a little flavor on your mashed potatoes. They can also act as your food's best buddy in the battle against spoilage. When you think of dried herbs, you might picture Grandma's spice rack, but in Amish kitchens, these bundles of green goodness are more like a secret weapon for survival. You see, herbs like rosemary and thyme are packed with natural antimicrobial properties, making them fantastic for preserving food. Instead of letting those tasty greens languish in the fridge, the Amish dry them out and hang them from the kitchen ceiling, where they wait patiently to add zing to everything from soups to stews. Now, you might be surprised to learn that thyme has a history that goes way back. Ancient Egyptians used it to preserve mummies. Yes, mummies. So, when you sprinkle thyme on your beef stew, you can rest easy knowing it's been keeping food fresh for thousands of years. That's like having a culinary bodyguard in your spice cabinet. In the Amish way of life, these dried herbs serve a double purpose. They bring flavor and keep food fresher for longer. Imagine a winter stew bubbling on the stove, filled with vegetables from last summer's harvest and herbs that were dried months ago. That's the kind of hearty meal that warms the soul and keeps you going when the weather outside is frightful. One of my own kitchen adventures involved trying to dry oregano from my garden. I was all set thinking I would have enough to season meals for months, but it turns out my cat had other plans. Every time I turned around, he was sneaking off with a leaf or two, treating my oregano like it was catnip. Lesson learned. Maybe I should have hung it higher up or at least set a cat guard. The Amish approach to dried herbs isn't just practical, it's also a nod to their deep-rooted respect for nature and its gifts. They know how to make the most out of what they have, ensuring that nothing goes to waste. That bundle of thyme hanging from the kitchen ceiling is more than a spice. It's a symbol of resourcefulness and creativity, traits that are essential in their everyday lives. While most of us might head to the store for fresh herbs that can wilt faster than you can say dinner is served, the Amish have mastered the art of preservation. They turn herbs into a reliable pantry staple that not only spices up a meal, but also keeps it safe. Just like that trusty old jar of pickles, dried herbs are part of the Amish toolkit for thriving without a fridge. proving once again that innovation comes in many forms, often with a side of humor and a dash of history. While most of us would panic at the thought of a fridge breakdown, the Amish merely shrug and chuckle. Their food storage secrets have kept them thriving for generations, proving that you don't need modern appliances when you have creativity, tradition, and a pinch of salt. Imagine the time you popped open a jar of homemade pickles. The crunch, the tang. There's nothing quite like it. I once tried to impress my friends with my own batch of pickles. Let's just say they ended up being a little too experimental and required a strong stomach. But hey, that's part of the journey, right? Learning from our pickling flops just adds to the charm of home preservation. And while we're at it, wouldn't it be nice if we could store memories as well as the Amish store vegetables? Think about those family gatherings filled with laughter, shared recipes, and the delightful chaos of cooking together. We could all use a little more of that in our lives.